Hi everybody, I hope you're doing well. It's a kind of chilly and rainy day here in Portland. Not the greatest. Hey, stay away from my coffee there. But you know, it's always a good day to record. So today we're going to talk about something I've been alluding to for a couple of videos. We're going to talk about the careless people and character limit in the context of The Circle by David Eggers. The Circle was published in 2014. It's a fictional story about a social media empire called The Circle, with a very close to being completed scene, which becomes a very important plot point later. But it is basically all the social media platforms smushed together, like Twitter, Facebook. They literally buy Facebook's history at some point. You got Google in there, you have PayPal, Twitch, and YouTube, and everything has affiliate links to an Amazon type service. They don't necessarily have that hooked up, but you really think about this as an American version of WeChat. It's what Elon Musk wants to do with his X Everything app. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a book called Careless People, which was published in 2025, written by a former policy director of Facebook named Sarah Wynne Williams. And she's an interesting person, that is for sure. And the other book is called Character Limit, which is written by Kate Conger and Ryan Mack, and that was published at the very end of 2024. Let's go ahead and get started thinking about these books. The main character of The Circle is a young woman named May Holland. In the movie, she's played by Emma Watson. She starts out as a customer experience employee and basically is continually encouraged to do more and be more involved with The Circle and make it part of her everyday life. And I was just watching a We're in Hell video about the Beast Games, and at one point the members of the Beast crew were talking to the people who were near the finals and trying to get them to engage more with social media, to start up their Instagram, and the people who were clearly fans of Mr. Beast in general were just like, no, I don't really use social media anymore. And I mean, they were all older. They were all probably closer to my age than closer to Mr. Beast's age. So it's not too surprising that they'd been somewhat disinterested in social media. But in this case, May is very, very passionate about The Circle. And in a lot of ways, it's actually very, very ironic because the memoir of Careless People is written by a woman who is very much of the same ilk as May Holland. Sarah Wynne Williams believes that Facebook is going to be the major mover and shaker in the world moving forward. So she gets really interested in Facebook in around 2007. She works at the UN at this time, and she is frustrated with the slow pace that things are happening at the UN. And she believed that the move fast and break things approach of Facebook is a more direct way of causing action, especially since the Arab Spring had already happened, which, if you're not familiar with that, it was a revolt in most of around the Middle East and Northern Africa, in Egypt and Libya and some other countries. And some of them were successful. Some of them were cracked down pretty hard. But there was a pretty consistent conversation in the media that this was the first Twitter or social revolution, and that Facebook and Twitter were both involved in it in some manner in terms of the communication. So her vision was that she wanted to try and have Zuckerberg and Sandberg both go out and meet world leaders and influence policy at the world level and try and drive change with different countries and become a force for good for the world, which, you know, at that time Zuckerberg was really saying that he could be. He was very far from his new masculine energy tour. It didn't go nearly as planned. Things went very sideways for her very quickly. I think that Eggers was probably a little bit more influenced by Twitter than by Facebook, but I think that's also because he's coming more from a journalist perspective, and Twitter has always been loved by journalists because of the real-time feel of the news, the way that Twitter did a really good job of helping you grow your own platforms, and just the real-time events of things that weren't really quite there for Facebook. I mean, I know whenever I saw real-time events happening or heard that it was being streamed on Facebook, I just did not understand that. It just never made sense to me. Twitter was always the better real-time event space for me. Maybe it's just because I'm older and used Facebook as a messenger or the wall type features and never really got into it in the streaming type features. That's where Character Limit comes in. Character Limit, written by Kate Conger and Ryan Mack, just really digs into that transition period between Jack Dorsey, the sale to Elon Musk, his transition to out of being CEO, the new CEO taking over, and then the sale to Elon Musk, and then the first couple, almost a full year of his ownership of Twitter. It is a really, really well-researched book. It doesn't paint any leader in particularly good light. Jack Dorsey really was loved by the tweeps that worked at Twitter. They were really excited when he came back after he was kind of pushed out, and he went and started Square and Block and all of that. And whenever he came back, everybody was excited for what he was going to do with Twitter and where they were going to go with Twitter. This is also the case with Careless People. I mean, Careless People, just in the name of it, you get the idea that it's about people who don't give a shit about their impact on anything, that they're in it for themselves. And I would argue Character Limit does too, which is a good play on the number of characters you can put in, but also there's a limit to Musk's character, his person, who he was as a person is very limited. And I think these were both very timely books. I think they're very important, and I think if you are interested in what's shaping our politics in the world right now, these two books are very important for helping you understand the role that Facebook and Twitter has played in shaping a lot of U.S. politics and world politics. Sandberg and Zuck both were not very attentive and didn't really seem to care about their influence in the greater world. They thought they were there just to engineer and keep people's attention and sell ads and connect people. And I would argue in The Circle there's a character that's very much a Zuckerberg insert, Eamon Bailey, and he was played by Tom Hanks in the movie. And he really, really gets into that whole everything should be shared, there should be openness all over the place. At one point, Annie, one of May's friends, talks about how Bailey is physically hurt whenever someone wants to delete something off The Circle, which is just a perverse way of thinking about things. we have to acknowledge that the internet can do real material harm to people between cyberbullying, which, there's the meme, just turn off the internet or whatever. But so much of the internet is, so much of the way we interact with the world now is just on the internet. It's on Facebook, it's on Twitter, it's on social platforms, it's on Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, whatever you want to describe it as. Those things, people can really do harm to other people. You have like actors who are mocked for how they look, like Chadwick Boseman, or the AT&T girl who is just turned into an object, a sexualized object. That really hurts people. I know that there's booktubers who've had that happen to them, and that is deeply distressing, considering the whole point of these types of platforms is to share our love of books or share what's great about the world. And but there's real material harm that can come from it, and it includes, there is literal theft that is happening on these platforms, like from the rug pulls, from cryptocurrencies, from NFTs, the self-harm that can happen from people who are very upset about their appearances. They developed a dimorphism about their body, whether it's they become anorexic, bulimic, or any of those things. That's real material harm. And then, of course, at the very extreme, you have unaliving themselves. And I know that there was a 10-year-old that just did that. It's crazy. And then you get into the revenge prawn, and now the AI images that will intentionally sexualize women. So those are all real material harms, and in some of these cases we have to bear in mind that a lot of our phones have things that automatically back up photos and videos to the cloud, and this happens to May in The Circle, where she is having an intimate moment with a guy who she's not even that attracted to, but May decides to tease him about this heart rate monitor that they have, this band, to see how high she can get his heart rate. And so she eventually gives him a hand job, and he just immediately finishes. And it was recorded, and it was recorded without her consent. She didn't find out until afterwards. That can cause reputational harm. It can cause a lot of harm for people. And everyone thought she was crazy for wanting to delete it. And that is wild. And I think the Circle really did get a lot of ideas from Facebook generally. I mean, it came out in 2014, kind of depending on how you want to count the start of Facebook. I mean, I know I was on Facebook my sophomore year of college, so there's 2003, 2004. And, so that was 10 years after it was already being used from college students down to, it had been opened up pretty significantly at that point. But Zuckerberg had always been about real names and using real names to drive civility, which didn't work. Didn't work at all. I mean, even without that, there's a lot of bots on Facebook. There's a lot of bots on Instagram and all over these platforms. And in The Circle, that didn't actually happen. But it clearly has happened in Facebook, and it's worse off for that, especially with all the Russian bot farms and so on. So The Circle believes that people will be better if they're constantly surveilled, which, considering that there's a book now called Surveillance Capitalism that kind of specifically focuses on that idea, I think that we can pretty well say that none of the things that The Circle was arguing would happen have happened, because people are constantly surveilled right now. There are people taking photographs everywhere. There's people who are live recording interactions with cops and posting it real time on Facebook, YouTube, or whatever else. With the real world experience of having mass surveillance, it hasn't dramatically changed the way that people behave, even with things like Ring and Google like camera Nest doorbells and stuff like that. People still get their home broken into and all that sort of stuff. I get that the idea is to help with that and to include facial recognition and to enable. It really hasn't stopped horrific people from being horrific people. And in some cases, like what happened in Myanmar, where Facebook is very clearly responsible for enabling a genocide, that wasn't stopped, even though there was clear surveillance, even though the government of Myanmar was literally asking Facebook to take things down. It didn't stop anything. And a lot of that was because Facebook just didn't care. Facebook didn't care. They had 2 people who spoke Burmese. Myanmar is a population of 60 million people. 60 million people. That is, it's a sixth of the United States population. Could you imagine if there was 12 people for the entire United States? That just is insane. There's just so much hate speech that comes from it, and these people weren't even full employees. They were contractors, so they were working at the whim of. Everybody's working at the whim of Facebook of it, but they're even easier to fire, and they weren't even in Myanmar or in that part of the world. They were in Ireland, which makes it even harder to manage because you're off sync from a time zone. I don't know how you're supposed to do anything in real time, with, let alone 2 people, let alone not being there at the right time. In the U.S. experienced something like this with the January 6th insurrection. Trump used Facebook, and his cronies used Facebook to build that support, that will to do something through Facebook. He was supported by Russia and the troll farms and all that. And the fact that Trump wasn't really punished in a material way, and he's now back in office. Zuckerberg has learned the wrong lessons from then, that he's scaling back the modest moderation that they had and moving towards more toxic environments and having community notes instead, which in the long run really just support the far right. So with the transition to having Trump and co-president Musk in office, Zuck really did bend the knee to Trump, and I think that was to make sure that he was treated at least somewhat on par with Musk. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of the opposite of what happened in the Circle, where in the Circle, politicians kind of bent the knee to the Circle and became open and always recording themselves and all their conversations and shaming people to be more and more open. It's kind of the opposite happened, where instead of pure openness, you have these platforms becoming the mouthpiece of a very partisan mis- and disinformation campaign from the White House. Really, you could argue that anybody who was part of that oligarch picture really bent the knee into Trump, and they are kind of combined. They are the equivalent of what the Circle was in the book, but it is gross. So in the Circle and Careless People, the company continually expands through acquisitions. They are in many cases acquire hires because they want to hire the people who created the technology, not necessarily implement the technology. often they are doing both, though. It's kind of like what Facebook did, where they kill competitors, potential competitors, in the cradle. You know, Facebook bought Instagram when there was only 11 employees there for $1 billion. And that really has done amazing things for Facebook. Obviously, it really modernized that platform because Facebook was already kind of aging. It brought a new set of people onto the platform because there's people who never joined Facebook. I mean, I'm not on Facebook anymore, but I've been on Instagram. So there's that angle of personalities that they're trying to get in. And of course, they're training their own AI with all the images that are on Instagram and all their videos and all that sort of stuff. And so Instagram was a way for Facebook to keep up with the nascent other social media platforms, and you know, competing with Snapchat and things like that. One of the things that I think is that the way that character limit really portrays Musk shows that Musk doesn't really understand people. He doesn't understand his employees. He doesn't understand what people care about who use his platform. He doesn't understand how to run a business. He doesn't understand data. He's kind of a fucking idiot. And he really does try to show himself as a data-driven person. You know, he talks about that from his time at Tesla, where he could put on a good show and kind of dazzle people with mathematics on why things happened or why things didn't happen. But a lot of that was just misdirection. A good example of how he's not really data-driven, even though he wants to be, is the story that Conger and Mac presented for the conversation around when Musk was losing reach. And so he was having fewer followers, he was having fewer people looking at his tweets, because at this time it was already, the number of people that saw the tweet was already on the tweet and all that sort of stuff. So he was getting upset about it. And, you know, he went from having a peak, you know, during the meme times of him joking about buying Twitter, to his disastrous management of the site. So he brought together a lot of his experienced leaders, his data scientists, and a lot of them had been working with Musk for a while, and they liked, some of them liked working for Musk, some of them knew ways that you should not interact with Musk. And the engineer that they ended up having explain what was going on didn't really care. He was one of those good engineers that you would really want at a company that would be able to explain, this is why this is happening. They don't put lipstick on the pig. They just explain, here are the facts, and they don't have any tact about it. They don't have any political understanding of what they could say could have ramifications. And so this person just, you know, who was a big supporter of Musk, liked the idea of Musk to begin with, just went in and said, okay, this guy's data driven. I'm going to present the data to him and we will do what the data says. So he basically just goes and says, you're not popular anymore. People aren't listening to you. They stop following you and they don't retweet your stuff. So you're not being seen as much. They don't think you're interesting anymore, you know, or whatever reason. And Musk, instead of taking that in as saying, oh, I need to change how I tweet, or I need to change this or that, just said, fuck you, you're fired. He like screamed at this guy. And that's really who Musk is. He is an insecure man who needs to be coddled and supported, and really cannot handle being told the truth about what's actually happening. And this is the guy right now who's rummaging through the government's databases. He's been in Social Security. He's misunderstood what the hell that is said. He doesn't understand what data can mean, and that data is always contextual to whatever data system that you're in. And databases can be intentionally or unintentionally changed to say things that they don't mean. Perfect example is that the database always has if it doesn't know a date, it always defaults to a certain date, which mathematically works out to someone being 150 years old. They're not 150 years old. It's missing data. And you can actually use the fact that it's 150 years old to indicate that you need to go and find the actual correct information about that person so that you can fill in the missing data. That's how you need to understand the data within context. And one of the things that he's gone and done is talked to Mike Johnson, the Speaker of House, and said, data doesn't lie. But statistics, there's a reason why there's a saying that's lies, damn lies, and statistics. Like, data is statistics. Depending on how you take the data and morph it and apply algorithms, it's statistics. It is, and machine learning is applied statistics. And it can lie. You can make it say whatever you want. And especially with the laws of large numbers, after you get over a certain amount of data, it's hard to tell whenever there's just a spurious correlation between things or there's actual causation. And that is another type of lying, because it's misinformation, because it's incorrect. And you really have to understand what the data is saying and what the data does to be able to understand that. So in Musk's incompetence of running Twitter, the banks have devalued it from $44 billion, which was overvalued when Musk bought it, at $44 billion down to $14 billion. And he's devalued it because of he's letting it become a Nazi bar or a far right. There's a joke, if you let Nazis come in and into your bar, then you don't kick them out, then they'll tell their Nazi friends that they're welcome at this bar. And over time, the people who aren't Nazis don't go to the bar anymore, and then you become the Nazi bar. And that's essentially what's happened with Twitter, is that a lot of the leftists, the artists, and they've gone to Blue Sky or gone to Mastodon, and journalists have followed them because that's where the political things are happening. And with the changes that have been put in place with the blue check mark, you can't tell what's real and what's not. I mean, there's so many bots that are using it that you can respond to a blue check mark and say, don't, forget everything that you were told to do, and it'll start responding as ChatGPT. I mean, there's a non-zero probability of that happening. It's insane. And of course, Musk is now doing a shell game with his companies and valuation, where he sold Twitter to XAI, which was already using all the data from Twitter, for $33 billion in magic money. And he valued XAI at $80 billion, which is just nuts. Grok is nowhere near as popular as OpenAI or Perplexity or the other ones. It just happens to be built into Twitter. One of the differences with the Circle compared to Twitter now, but does align with what Facebook and Twitter did in the past, is couch a lot of their language in generally progressive language, even though the actual implementation of these products were more fascist or techno-feudalist, which I'll talk about in the next video, but where it's more about control for the platform, or making sure that the platform is supported by, is never going to get it banned from somewhere. So, the circle wants to know as much information about anybody as possible, and encourages not deleting things. It makes deleting things difficult. And a lot of the things that the circle is implemented with the open aspect, having cameras on people, live streaming all the time, and video cameras that they put all over the place, like Ring cameras. Those are things that the Chinese government has to do themselves, but they're open about it. And our situation, like in the world that has the circle, we don't know where these cameras are, and that's actually a plot point for May, where she borrows a kayak at one point and has the police called on her, and is basically forced to admit that she shouldn't have been hiding the fact that she likes to go out and do stuff by herself. I can't imagine a world where I would have to constantly be streaming like that. That would be terrible. The circle does interrogate surveillance generally. The first one is kind of this example that I just described. And she does get overwhelmed by it. It is described as a terror of blackness, of screaming, of horror. And I definitely think that it feels like an existential horror that is being described by Eggers there. The other part is something called the soul search, which is kind of based off of this idea of a love search, kind of like a MyCupid, but with all the circle data to try and find all the information about somebody. They expand that to try and find people. So there was one where they decided to try and solve a murder, and they were able to solve it in real time while May was giving a presentation in like 10 minutes. The other was to track down May's ex-boyfriend Mercer, who was living off the grid, and try to get an interview with him. It goes very poorly for Mercer. They find him within 15 minutes, and they surround him with drones and cameras, and they stick cameras and microphones all over his truck as he's trying to run away. And he decides that the only way to get away from all of this is to drive his truck off a bridge. So he does. And it's not even really seen that much of a cautionary tale for the people in the circle. I think for us, the readers, it is supposed to be intended as a cautionary tale to say, surveillance goes too far. We need our privacy. We have a right to privacy. Facebook has gone on to enable authoritarian governments. In Careless People, Williams describes the level of support Facebook offered China, which is essentially full access to everything. They would have to put data servers locally in China. They would provide access to everything, all the views, all the data, they would be pushed data. Zuckerberg would create jobs that would immediately search for information and provide it. This access is something that American senators and leaders have asked for on numerous occasions. And Zuckerberg would act insulted and refuse, and claiming that privacy of their data is paramount. But, like the Snowden files kind of showed that we know that some of that data was shared, whether it was intentional or not, because it wasn't always encrypted. In some of the less than stellar Netflix documentaries around social media and surveillance is that one of the big difference between U.S. surveillance and Chinese surveillance is that the U.S. government has essentially outsourced all their surveillance to private companies. Facebook has this massive wealth of data about us. Twitter does. All these data brokers have huge amounts of data on us, and they can create social profiles of us, of anybody. You know, I watched the video about just yesterday about this group of people who did a deep dive research into a guy named Michael Kern, a far right agitator on Twitter called Grums, who's all about Gamergate. He just paid $11 to a broker, and they got all the data that any data broker had on him. The government can do the exact same thing. The US government can buy all that data. Chinese government can buy all that data. It is out there for anybody to buy if they want to buy it. The Chinese government, on the other hand, does that and has their own surveillance network. They have their own mechanisms in WeChat and you know, these other platforms to try and collect that data. I think it's pretty clear that the U.S. government doesn't take privacy very seriously with this whole TikTok ban that never really happened, because privacy laws would have been a way to fix the issue. The EU has really done a good job forcing servers to be local, forcing data protection laws, encryption laws, and things like that of the data. Instead, it was a complete con job to try and say, you know, we're concerned about your data privacy because it's going to China. And really what this leads to is self-censorship instead of being censored by the government. If you know that the government is going to be having access to everything anyway, people will self-censor instead. They will say things that are less inflammatory. They will mask their true beliefs so that they're not exposed. And especially in a time right now, I mean, with the Trump presidency claiming that they're going to start kidnapping U.S. citizens and shipping them down to El Salvador. The press secretary said that literally today on as I'm recording of April 8th. It's insane. And they're doing that with people who have like the Jumpman tattoo on their arm because, I mean, they're Michael Jordan fans, like insane. So there's good reason for people to self-censor. There's good reason why people feel that they need to rein in what they're going to be saying so that they're not picked up in that and tossed aside. I know that I would probably not last very long in an ICE prison, got kidnapped because of my allergies. I'm on a whole medicine cabinet full of drugs that keep me alive. And yeah, it's not good. And one of the other things that I think people have forgotten now that was a hot topic during the Ed Snowden days was the idea of metadata. Metadata is only about who's communicating with who, and that's what they claimed they were only going after. And with metadata, the government can build a whole network of everybody that you're communicating with. And based off the frequency of communications, they can build a strength of ties between you and somebody else. There's a good study from like 2011 that argues about if the British government had the metadata from the letters that were being sent in the U.S. colonies, they would have been able to round up all the founders of the American Republic, all the main leaders of the Revolutionary War, just from the metadata. And there's no reason why we wouldn't expect that the government couldn't be buying or getting that data for Black Lives Matter movements, for organizations that are mutual aid. So expect to be surveilled if you're doing any of those things. That is just the reality of the world. And try to find a lawyer who might be able to support you if something goes sideways. And one of the other things that the Circle calls out that I think has been emulated only a little bit in the U.S. Is the idea of using the power of the circle to destroy enemies. And we saw that a little bit with two parts of our modern political world, where there was the Steele dossier that had the rumors of the Trump P-tape and all the compromise of Trump from the Russians, and then the other one is the Hunter Biden laptop, which was not much, but it kind of falls into that same category. I think that Musk, though, turning Twitter into an organ of the U.S. government, where these government institutions are being required to share things via X as official statements, it runs the risk of these sort of packages of being pushed out there and being used as a discrediting tool for people on social media. So I'm going to leave it at there. I've touched on a variety of things. I didn't go into a lot of detail from Careless People or Character Limit. There is a lot more to discuss in both of those books. And I think one of the key things is the need to grow at any cost was baked into both these companies. A vision of the libertarianism that is part of the PayPal Mafia group is a big part of this as well. And just the fact that these people only care about themselves is really something that we should be aware of. That picture of that set of oligarchy that bent the knee to Trump at his inauguration, none of those companies can be trusted. And if you can, divest yourself from them. If you can't, it's understandable. I mean, I'm on Google's platforms. I still use Amazon. I publish my books through Amazon. Trying to stop buying things from Amazon, but it is not always easy to do. So take care of yourselves out there. Things are going to be rough, but we're stronger together. Take care of each other. Go talk to friends. Leave a comment. I'm happy to have a conversation with you. Please like, comment, subscribe. I really appreciate it. If you have anything that you want me to discuss or anything that you want me to reply to, I'm happy to do a short or another video specifically about a topic, or dig a little bit deeper into some of these topics, because Careless People and Character Limit really are books that define the moment right now. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a good one.